If states cannot adapt to the conditions of war, they risk losing the war. As a multifaceted phenomenon, war places states under heavy obligations. The states that cannot fulfill these obligations must struggle with many problems. The state has to fulfill many responsibilities, such as the army's need for weapons and ammunition, the need for nutrition, the renewal of manpower, and the reinforcements of troops, and the economic sufficiency to sustain the war. In order to keep the moral and psychology of the army fighting on the front line high, it is important to provide them with good facilities. The demands of the soldiers who put their lives on the line must be met. This is part of the basic doctrine of the warfare, and it's practiced by modern armies. The 18-month-long war between Russia and Ukraine is one of the biggest wars on the world agenda in recent times. However, developments in the course of the war makes the Russian-Ukrainian war unique in some respects. There are major differences in perspective between the two armies. While the Russian army is occupying, the Ukrainian army is defending the homeland. Therefore, the motivation are also quite different. In recent days, Ukrainian counterattack have forced the Russian army to deal with great difficulties. Russia's most effective weapons, even the so-called gods of war, are being destroyed one by the Ukrainian army. Let's take a look at how Ukraine destroys the Russian god of war. While the war is raging on the front line, Russian troops are having problems at many points. Russian artillery units are trying to block the Ukrainian counterattack. Russian troops are worried that the Ukrainian offensive could bring down the Russian defense network. However, Russian artillery units are unable to establish the logistic network needed to thwart the Ukrainian offensive. The increasingly difficult conditions on the battlefield are forcing Russian artillery to break away from the classical Russian war doctrine. This reduces the effectiveness of Russian guns, which Russian artillerymen have nicknamed the gods of war. Russian firepower has traditionally been based on the volume rather than precision. While this conventional wisdom may have worked in the early stages of the invasion of Ukraine, the situation is quite different now. By preventing Russian troops from the firing volume, Ukrainian defenses are silencing Russian artillery. Russian troops, which had little capacity for precision firing, are looking for new methods. Another factor reducing the volume of fire of the Russian army is the lack of ammunition. The Russian army does not have the ammunition to feed its artillery units and ensure frequent firing. A strong logistic network is required to ensure a high volume of fire. Russia is struggling to build its logistic network. This prevents Russian troops from using their most effective weapons. Russian artillery units, which remain silent, continues to lose positions. Another problem from Russian artillery units is the weakness of artillery battery raiders. Due to the war of artillery barrels and the slow replacement of weapons, many units lack of firepower. Due to these problems, the Russian army seems to have abandoned its basic volume fire strategy. Russian artillery, which focuses on precision and pinpoint shooting, is also failing in this regard. Lacking the air support necessary for precision firing, Russian troops are suffering a serious loss in terms of operational capability. Russian troops are trying to use unmanned aerial vehicles and laser-guided ammunition to adjust artillery fire, but their moves are being destroyed by Ukrainian counterattacks. The Russian artillery fire system worth $100 million, which was recently destroyed as a result of the Ukrainian airstrike, dealt a major blow to the Russian army. The Ukrainian army, which managed to silence the Russian artillery batteries, continues its counterattacks in the better way. The change in Russia's war strategy is not expected to yield quick results. For this reason, Russian troops are trying to move their big guns behind the front line. In the ongoing fighting on the southern front, Ukrainian intelligence is monitoring the movements of Russian forces. Russian troops who are observed to be trying to move their large artillery systems on the front line are being targeted. On the instructions of the Ukrainian commanders, Russia's artillery batteries are being targeted, especially in recent attacks. As a result of these attacks, the Ukrainian army aims to disturb Russia's defense capabilities and isolate its front-line defense units. According to the published reports, the Ukrainian army destroys 3 Russian units for every one its losses. For this reason, the Russian army, which had numerical superiority at the beginning of the war, is losing this advantage. The Russian army is focusing on solving its problems, but the intensive Ukrainian operations do not give Russian troops the opportunity to recover. Russia is seeking support from its allies to reinforce its stockpiles, but it is having difficulty finding the support it needs. Russia's relations with its allies are also problematic, with North Korea and Iran demanding support. Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to hold a meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the coming days. Local sources reported that the meeting will be held because of Vladimir Putin, who is desperate and asks for help. The losses of the Russian army outside the conflict are also increasing with each passing day. The increase in non-combat losses of the Russian army, which has lost its war motivation, has attracted attention in recent days. After the Russian Ka-52 type helicopter crashed in the past days, the number of posts on subject increased. According to the statements made by Russian officials, the helicopter crashed as a result of an accident. However, it turned out that Russia suffered its 50th non-combat helicopter loss since the beginning of the war. The situation regarding the crew of the helicopter that crashed into the Sea of Azov is unknown. Experts attribute the losses of the Russian army to the stress of being under the pressure of an active conflict, lack of comprehensive training, inexperienced pilots, and poorly maintained aircraft. As the Russian military's losses mount, its problem in compensating for its shortcomings are growing every day. The concerns of the Russian army, which has lost its advantage at critical points due to the strategic Ukrainian offensive, are increasing day by day. According to information obtained from local sources, it is reported that the troops of the Russian army have seriously lost their combat motivation. The increasing news of desertion of the Russian soldiers in recent days also confirms this situation. It is also known that the Russian army has serious problems in reinforcing the troops at the front line. As we have stated in the past days, the Moscow administration has started making job advertisements in neighboring countries in order to recruit new soldiers. Unable to get the expected returns from these advertisements, the Moscow administration needs to find another solution. The Ukrainian army is closely following the problems faced by the Russian army. On the days when the Russian army is dealing with its problems, the Ukrainian army is also increasing its attacks. The Ukrainian army, which does not want the Russian troops to strengthen their defense positions, does not give the opportunity. Ukrainian intelligence, which continues infiltration operations at its strategic points, increases its reconnaissance and observation activities. This gives the Ukrainian army a wide operational space. What do you think could be the main reason for the change in the Russian army's war strategy? How do you assess the situation of the Russian army? How do you interpret the increasing success of Ukrainian counterattacks? Do you think Russia will get the support it expects from its allies? Do you think the course of the war will change in the coming days? We value your opinion. Please share it with us.